This MD Talkback Mic does everything. I can talk to the band, or to the media team, or even run my mic through the main mix. I can see who I'm speaking to at all times through our ProPresenter stage screens, and through Stream Decks, I can signal to our media team members to let them know that I'm in their headphones and they can all communicate back to me with their own mics at each of those positions. BitFocus Companion and the Stream Deck Pedal are the two main tools I use to make this happen, so in this video I want to walk you through how I set this all up step by step. We're about to walk through all the actions and cues that I used inside of Companion to set all this up, but you can also download a single page that holds all of these actions together if you want to peruse through them yourself. The link is in the description below. So first, really quickly, let's walk through the tools and gear that I use to actually get this set up in case you want to do something similar. The main thing, obviously, is the Stream Deck Pedal, and it basically works exactly like a Stream Deck, just in a pedal form. Then after that, you might need to grab a couple extra XLR cables. I bought a headphone amp, a cheap headphone amp, and then a cheap mic to use so that some of our other media positions had mics that they could use. And surprisingly enough, all of this was actually cheaper than the A/B switch that I was thinking about picking up to put at our Talkback mic. So now moving over to the software side of things, I'm obviously using Companion to do all the heavy lifting here. This is basically creating a software version of an A/B switch, and the Stream Deck Pedal is just the controller for that. And for this video, I'm going to assume you know a little bit about Companion. So if you're brand new to Companion, you never heard of Companion before, this is not the video to watch first. But if you go watch a couple other videos explaining what Companion is, then come back here, you should be able to follow along. Getting all the actions and cues right on Companion took a little bit of trial and error. Now, I'm not a Companion expert by any means. I don't necessarily consider myself to be a Companion expert, but it did take me a little while to work out some kinks in the system, but I got it all up and running, and I'm going to walk you through each of these buttons, what they're doing. You can copy those over if you want to your own Companion system. Obviously, they won't, copy over one for one. You're going to have to change out a lot of variables, but you can at least kind of see what's going on there and maybe kind of copy or emulate some of those actions and cues if you're trying to do something similar. This project too is also what made me switch from running Companion on multiple different machines to running Companion Satellite. You might be able to do this without using Companion Satellite. I just, when looking into it, trying to figure out how I would do it, this is what made the most sense to me, and I thought this would be the best route to take, is to switch everything over to one Companion instance and then running everything else off of Companion Satellite. But yeah, everything is being triggered through Companion. I'm routing mics to different outputs and different mixes on the Behringer Wing. I'm changing stage screens inside of ProPresenter, and I'm flashing lights on each of the Stream Decks. So I have some internal actions, I have some external actions on the Wing and on ProPresenter. All of that stuff is happening entirely through Companion. So to talk a little bit more in depth about the Stream Deck pedal, it's actually a pretty interesting pedal. I have about 3 to 6 button options with this pedal. I can press on each of the 3 main pedals, and then I can long press on each of them. So I can have up to 6 buttons that I can trigger inside of Companion through this one pedal. So for right now, the way I've set it up, I've decided to have the middle press send my Talkback mic to the band. The left press is to send my mic to the media team, and a right button press is to send my mic to the band and the media team at the same time. And then if I press and then press and hold on the right button, that actually unmutes my mic in the main mix. So with those options, I can talk to the band, I can talk to only the media team, and it'll mute my mic in the band's in-ears, or I can talk to the band and the media team if I need to talk to everybody. Then I even have the option, like if it's during rehearsal, I can unmute my mic in the main mix. If I need to talk to someone who doesn't have a headphone on or just need to say something really quick, I can just unmute it there and talk. And I found that obviously that's a lot more pleasant than yelling across the room, to someone in the back. Then the last thing that I added was a long press on the middle button, and that actually changes our ProPresenter stage screen back to our slide preview stage screen. So that's just another little thing that I've realized in doing this after a couple weeks, is that obviously if I hit a button to talk to the media team, that'll change our stage screen, but that'll change it to like a worship preset, stage screen. So if it's during like a, 2-minute countdown right before service starts, and I want to pull that countdown video back up to preview that so I know how much time is left in that countdown, then I can hit that and it'll change that stage screen back to a preview of the, countdown video. I could also add a timer on the, stage screens for worship, just so I have that. That might be worth adding too, but I went ahead and added this action here so I can set that back to a preview stage screen in case I want to go back to a different view. So this pedal really does give you a lot of flexibility into making, different changes like that on the fly, which is pretty cool. This goes way beyond just an A/B switch for a Talkback mic. But anyway, now talking about audio routing at the soundboard. That's another thing that you have to set up if you're doing this. How are you going to route audio to different places? What I did is just create a single bus mix, and in that bus mix, all I'm sending to it is my talkback mic, the mic at the soundboard, the mic at ProPresenter, and then the mic in our live stream room. So to talk to the media team, all that Companion does is just toggle that mic on in that bus mix. Then I'm sending this bus mix to the headphones that are plugged into the wing, then to the little headphone amp at ProPresenter, and then I'm running that bus mix over Dante to an iMac in our live stream room. The only reason I did that is just because it saved me another physical XLR cable and another headphone amp. So then again, all Companion is doing is just turning on or off where that talkback mic is being sent to at any given time. So then moving over to ProPresenter, all I'm doing there is just triggering a different stage screen depending on what button I press. And that's just for me so that I can look at the stage screen and I always know who my mic is being routed to. Otherwise, I'd have no idea on where that mic is actually being sent. So inside of ProPresenter, that just looks like creating 4 identical stage screens and then changing the text and color of this one box. And that text box obviously corresponds to each of the buttons on the Stream Deck pedal. All right, so inside Companion, the first thing that I want to talk about is just a couple quick Stream Deck pedal tips. So first, if you go over to surfaces, you can see we have our Stream Deck pedal here. You have to pick a startup page for this because otherwise it's going to start out at like page 1. So dedicate a page to this so that every time that pedal turns on, it starts up on this page, because otherwise it's going to start out at, you know, page 1 or something again, and you're like wondering why you can't trigger anything. It's because that Stream Deck pedal is on a different page inside of Companion. And then the other thing is I probably wouldn't download the Elgato Stream Deck software on the computer that you're running that Stream Deck pedal off of. So we're running the Stream Deck pedal off of our Trax computer on the stage. I originally downloaded the Stream Deck software and then I was having issues with it, ended up just deleting it off of the computer, and that works fine. So as long as you have Companion or Companion Satellite installed on that computer, you don't need the Elgato like Stream Deck software in order to use the Stream Deck pedal. The other thing that you need to know about the Stream Deck pedal is that it only triggers like the first 3 buttons on the page. So if you normally have a page up button there, you're going to have to move it so that you can put your other buttons there. So obviously the first button is the left foot pedal, the second button is the middle foot pedal, and then the third button is the right foot pedal. So now moving on to the actual buttons that we have placed here, we have talkback to media, which again, like we went over, is what sends my talkback mic to the media team. We have talkback to band, which just sends it to our band's in-ears. And then we have talkback to band and media. And then obviously, like I said, a long press will send it to our main mix. Then if you download this page for yourself, you'll also have this empty button here. This button is the flashing warning that goes to, you know, anyone on the media team. So if I run this button, if I hit test, you can see this is what shows up on all of those other Stream Decks, all of our media team Stream Decks. This button starts lighting up and flashing to let them know that I'm trying to talk to someone back there on the media team. This button in particular is not really being seen by anyone, but this is what I could copy and paste to like a new button and then go through, change out actions where I need them to. So if we go over to other pages that I actually use, you can see those actually in action. I just copy and pasted that one button over to these buttons and then changed out any actions that I needed to. But you know, I have it on that page, I have it on this page where our ProPresenter Stream Deck is set up, and then I also have it on this page, which is the Stream Deck that's over by our soundboard. And this is why running Companion Satellite is so helpful, right? Because I'm able to set all this up on one Companion instance, and that makes copying these buttons or triggering other buttons inside of Companion like this easy. So now let's walk through each of these buttons and go through each action one at a time here. So let's go back to our talkback to band, and I'm going to hit test so it runs. So this is again default starting position. My talkback mic is being routed to the band's in-ears. So right now this step 1 is all of the actions that was just triggered when I pressed this button. And the first thing to do is obviously to make sure my talkback mic is being sent to all the band's in-ears. So channel 34 is that talkback mic on the soundboard. And first it's being turned off in that media mix bus. That's what bus 15 is for us. And then it's being turned on in all of our in-ear mixes. So bus 5 is on, bus 6 is on, 7 is on, 8 is on, 9 is on, 10 is on, 12 is on. So that's the whole band. Then it's just internal actions for the background colors, changing this button to red, changing the other 2 buttons to green. Then I have this other internal action, and it's called abort all delayed actions and buttons on triggers. Again, this is me just trying to figure this out. I'm sure there's probably a simpler way to do all this, but if, for example, let me turn this off and I'll show you what happens. If I turn this off and then I trigger Talkback to Media, you see this button triggers as it should. I come back here and I go to Talkback to Band. You can see that little play icon is still there, like it's still running something on that button, like it hasn't completely stopped. So that's what this action is doing. It's aborting all delayed actions and buttons on triggers. So you can see now if I turn that back on, I hit test again, that little play button disappears. So I have that there. Moving on to these next 3 actions here. These are all just setting the step in like the step count here for these buttons. Each button has like a step count. So I'm setting the other 2 buttons to step 2. And then I'm setting this current button to step 1. Then we have just another action here, and this just turns that Talkback mic down in the main mix. So it doesn't mute it, because if it muted it, then it wouldn't send to all the other bus mixes. It just takes that main mix fader and drops it down to nothing. Then we have a ProPresenter action for the stage screen change. We want to choose which stage screen we want to affect, and then obviously which stage screen we want to trigger. And in this case, it's the band stage screen. And then lastly, I just have a couple release actions here. I don't want this button when I trigger step 1 to actually move to step 2 in this case. I want them to stay in step 1 until I trigger a different button, which then will move it to step 2. So that is just making sure that when I trigger this button in step 1, it stays in step 1. So this button stays in step 1, and then the background color still stays red. So then if I was to trigger these other 2 buttons, that's what would send it to step 2. Real quick, editing Zach here. Wanted to just mention this one action that I forgot to mention right here, which was the release after 1000 milliseconds action on this Talkback to Band button. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, I added a ProPresenter stage display layout action to change our stage screen or confidence monitor back to our current slide preview with timers layout, so that we could go back to see a countdown video or any other graphic that's up on the screen currently. So anyway, that was real quick. Forgot to mention that while I was going through this. Back to the video. And then moving over to step 2 on this button, you can see I have an action that sets this button back to step 1, and then a button trigger, press, and release on this button. Again, this is what I just figured out that works. I'll show you what happens if I turn these buttons off. What happens? It doesn't really work right. So you need these buttons here, because if I go to media and I trigger that, everything's working. Then if I go back to Talkback to Band and I trigger that, you can see it moves from step 2 to step 1 and no color change. Then I have to hit it again, and then it actually triggers everything that it's supposed to trigger. So really it's there to send the button back to step 1 and then trigger step 1. And that's how all of those actions are then changed. So the way that this is set up is that if the button is red, you're on step 1, and then on these other 2 buttons that are green, you're on step 2. That's how these 3 buttons kind of correlate with each other. So now moving to these other 2 buttons, they're all basically the same actions, just all the variables are being swapped out. So starting with Talkback to Media, if I trigger this, step 1, what happens? Again, the first thing I have is abort all delayed actions on buttons and triggers. Then again, we move through our sound actions. Our Talkback mic is being turned on that media mix, bus mix, and then it's being turned off to all of our band's in-ears. So bus 9 off, bus 10 off, etc. So now these next internal actions are where things kind of differ, because now I have to trigger all of those other buttons that are displayed on those other pages, letting the media team know that I'm trying to talk to them, right? So that's what all of these are. So a button trigger, press, and release on this location, on this location, this location, this location, this location, etc., etc., right? So I just swap out the button location that I want to trigger. So all of these are the same actions. If I scroll all the way down, this is through all of those different buttons on all of those different pages. There's page 3. Up here was page 10. So if I go down, scroll through all of this, still, you obviously have to add an action there for every single button you want to trigger. So if I wanted to add a couple more of these buttons, down here, I would have to make a new action on this page to trigger this button, to trigger this button, and to trigger this button. Continuing on, there's more internal actions like setting the background color for this button and setting the background color for the other 2 buttons, and then setting the current step for these buttons. And then these actions, again, set the step number for the other 2 buttons. And then again, making sure that the Talkback mic is turned off in the main mix. And again, changing out our stage screen in ProPresenter. And now instead of band, we're triggering the media stage screen. And again, step 2 is the exact same step 2 in the other button. It's triggering this button to go to step 1 and then triggering this button to press and release. And now moving over to Talkback to band and media. And again, a lot of the same stuff here, but tweaked depending on where it's going, because now I'm sending it to the band and the media. So Talkback Mic to the media bus mix is on, and then it's also on for all of our band's in-ears. So on for all of those bus mixes as well. Again, all of these same button triggers so that the media team knows that I am talking to them. So all of those buttons are being triggered again, same as on the other button. Again, more internal actions, setting background colors to these 3 buttons, and then setting the step count for the other 2 buttons. Again, the same as the last one. And again, changing our ProPresenter stage screen to band and media. So now the last thing on this is our long press. So I set it to release after 1,000 milliseconds. You can change the actual length of that press, but I set it to release after 1,000 milliseconds. And so on that, I added a fader set that just turns that Talkback mic up to 0 on the fader level. So 0 dB on the fader, it just turns it on basically in the main mix. And then the only other thing that changes is the stage screen layout in ProPresenter to let me know that I'm talking out into the mains. And then on step 2, again, it's the exact same as the other 2 buttons. So now last button that we need to take a look at is the actual flashing trigger button, because this one, again, this is what I had to kind of figure out how to get this to keep flashing and then keep going until I cut it off. Obviously, the actions that we use to cut and reset this button are on those other 3 buttons that we walked through. We walked through those actions already, but on this button, you actually have to put in those actions that loop that color change. So the way I did this, again, there might be other ways that are better or, simpler, but this is the way that I set this up, is that I set internal background color to black and then set a 10 millisecond delay, change the background color to red, a 500 millisecond delay, change the background color to black, 1000 millisecond delay, change the background color to red, 1500 millisecond, change it back to black. And then at 2000 milliseconds, I do a trigger, press, and release, and that's what fires this button again. So that's it really for that button. So again, this is just something you copy and paste to any button that you want to react like this. And then in these 3 main buttons, you have to then select each of those buttons that you place this on to actually fire initially. And then you use that abort all command to cut all of those and reset them. So anyway, that's a deep dive look on how I set this up inside of Companion. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully this was interesting to some. I thought it was a fun, brain teaser trying to figure this out. And, there was a lot of trial and error. Like I said, I'm not a Companion expert. So it took me a little bit of trial and error to, get all this sorted out correctly and figure out what worked and what didn't. Again, if you have any other tips or tricks that might be helpful in this situation, some maybe simpler workflows, feel free, leave them in the comments down below, because I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to see what maybe others are doing that's similar to this. But yeah, let me know if this is something that you're gonna maybe try yourself. I'd love to hear how it goes if you end up trying to do something similar like this. There's been weeks where there's been hiccups, like for some reason, if ProPresenter's not connecting to Companion right, I've had issues where it disconnected. It's not perfect. It's definitely a little bit more finicky than a physical A/B switch, but you get a lot more flexibility. You can take this way farther than you can, just take a normal A/B switch, right? So, and again, feel free to download that Companion page if you want to take a look at those actions in depth and copy some stuff over to your own, Companion workspace. Feel free to download that via the link in the description below. And if you're thinking about setting this up for yourself, again, I would first check out Companion Satellite. So if you haven't looked into Companion Satellite, go ahead and watch this video that I made talking about my experience switching over to Companion Satellite, the things you need to know before you start diving in and trying to do this stuff. Go ahead and watch this video, and I will see you over there.